Winter of '83, my analog horror movie, is now available physically or digitally. Click the link below to get 3 additional segments and director's commentary. Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. A few years ago, I decided to take a look at an unusual crossover between Batman and aliens. It was pretty good, actually. It had a few silly moments to be sure, but the art and writing did a phenomenal job creating a claustrophobic, atmospheric horror story featuring the Dark Knight needing to fight off xenomorphs in the middle of a jungle. Certainly an unexpected pairing, especially in how well it turned out, but sadly I was unable to find behind-the-scenes info about how it came about. Although that's partly because I assumed the book was the first collaboration between DC and Dark Horse on a crossover like this. Nope, actually it was several books in at that point. The first of these, crossing over Batman and the Predator, is actually something I'm planning on looking at later this year, so keep an eye out for that, assuming I don't have to cancel it for stupid scheduling reasons. But what's funny is that even before the Dark Knight fought the hellish alien creatures, Superman took them on first. So let's dig into Superman vs. Aliens #1 and see how an even more unlikely pairing went down.
Atop the fourth wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. What's with these awkward subjects? What's all this art so rubbish? To anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he is a man, punch, sporadically a grouch. Linkara, he has his own spaceship, but he's always on his couch. Linkara.
The cover is fine, not that great in my opinion, depicting the xenomorph in the background just kind of staring at a wall with its arms by its side while Superman floats over it. Or maybe this is actually a kaiju xenomorph and Clark here is looking for it and it's going to be hilarious when that thing turns and hits him with its giant head. We open in Earth orbit. Not so long ago in our history, events that transpired in the silent vacuum of space went unnoticed by man. Like an acid vapor putting a hole in the moon. Thanks, Marvel Man! Times change. Now we stare at space like a creepy voyeur. Something falls towards Earth. Satellites were launched into orbit to act as sentries, ever alert for approaching interlopers. The mission was a simple one. And still they managed to screw it up. You had one job! No, the LexCorp satellites detect the object falling to Earth and alert one Dr. Kimball about it. Soon we see Lois and Clark, with the good Mr. Kent looking particularly snazzy in a blue tie on a black shirt with a gray suit, being called to LexCorp. They give some exposition that this takes place during a time when Luthor himself was no longer in charge of the company. And that's always a weird thing, isn't it? While not under the branding, this is technically an Elseworld story. You don't have to adhere that closely to canon for what was going on in DC at the time. In any case, the two were summoned here because of the aforementioned Dr. Kimball, who runs LexCorp's space program, one so vast that it apparently exceeds NASA. And while Lex may use his space program to try to find new ways to kill Superman or more ways to become powerful, he's at least not launching cars into space with it. And yet, despite its size, said space program is very secretive. Okay, maybe they are launching cars into space, they just have the good sense not to publicize it. Dr. Kimball meets them at the helipad. I am Dr. Cheryl Kimball, and I am about to give you the story of the year. Helicopters that can go into space! But how do the helicopter blades keep them moving out there? LexCorp helicopters can now move space air. She explains how they've intercepted an object falling into the atmosphere and they're on their way to meet it where it lands. But doctor, what if this object has a hostile intent? Science and research should never be regarded in terms of benevolence or malevolence. The only thing that matters is discovery itself. So when the alien killing machine bisects you along the waist, you should feel really happy about what amazing discoveries you've made. It always kills me to see a character like this. I won't call it unrealistic, because the last decade has proven to us that parody and cartoonish villainy is quite realistic, but it always baffles me to see a scientist right out of the gate not giving a crap if something they discover is dangerous. Like, what's their end game? Some horrible alien virus or something wipes out all the scientists under her employ, then she puts out a research paper about the incident completely disconnected from it emotionally, and when she gets pushed back, her only response is,
Why? Because it's science, that's why.
Anyway, she admits that she didn't want reporters on this trip, but the higher-ups in LexCorp think it's best to reveal their discoveries right away. She explains that they've also picked up transmissions coming from the object. It's garbled, almost unintelligible, but I think you might find it interesting. Drink more Ovaltine. Actually, when Clark listens to it, he recognizes it as Kryptonian. Kimball does not know that, nor does she know that Clark is Superman, so why would they find the unintelligible alien language interesting? In any case, Clark can't make out what it's saying, and Kimball says that their computers are working on decoding it. Wanting to get a first look at the pod before LexCorp can, Clark uses his heat vision on some of the controls, forcing the helicopter to land a little early. It's nothing that would threaten their lives, just enough to overheat the systems, which still seemed kind of dangerous, but there you go. They land on a nearby beach where the helicopter pilot works to get the thing back up and running. Clark claims to go looking for help over the objection of said pilot, but Lois says to pay no mind to him, because when he sets his mind on something, he does it. Lois, I've set my mind on investing in Quibi. I think now's the right time. He quickly changes into Superman and flies out to the craft, wondering if someone's inside. It hits the atmosphere at the wrong angle, so it's burning up hard, forcing Superman to try to catch it and guide it into the water. He spots some Kryptonian markings and quickly deduces that it's unmanned, thankfully, and that it feels similar to the Matrix chamber that first brought him to Earth. What's that? Is it time yet again for my most unused segment, especially in light of people actually liking to know this stuff? Why, yes, it's time for comic history you don't care about but need to know in order to understand this. Post-Crisis on Infinite Earths, it was explained in Superman's new origin that instead of being a baby when he was sent to Earth, he was actually still a developing fetus via a Kryptonian birthing matrix and wasn't technically born until he arrived in Kansas. I read back in the day that this was because John Byrne wanted him unequivocally to be an American citizen and thus needed to be born on American soil, though I don't know how accurate that is, or if it's just a rumor. I do know the original pitch he had would have had him literally being born on Earth from his mother, who dies from kryptonite poisoning shortly after arriving. But yes, the birthing matrix is a thing that would persist through the 90s and well into the 2000s, until yet another origin came along that made him a baby again the whole trip. Anyway, the thing is heavily damaged, and Superman deposits it on the deck of a LexCorp ship. LexCorp has official rules that says we ain't supposed to talk to you, but I gotta say, it's a real honor to have you on my boat. Though I wish you weren't putting the garbage we just dumped in the ocean back on it. Superman orders them to stay back in case the thing blows up, but he feels compelled to touch it. One would assume he already was, since he had to carry it to the boat. But no, in this case, it activates some kind of telepathic circuitry that beams fragments of messages and images into his brain. What he gathers is that a group of scientists knew about Krypton's impending destruction and had their own solution for survival, building a giant dome over their city, planting key explosive charges in parts of their geography, and then when the planet blew up, the charges instead helped propel them out into space intact.
Of course! Don't you know anything about science?
The city's resources are dwindling and they need help, providing a general direction of how to get to it. The pod's power dies before he can get any more, though that's a lot already. Kimball's helicopter finally arrives. Superman, what the hell have you done to my discovery? Since you touched it, I can't even claim it was damaged in shipping. Superman explains about the message and how if he hadn't interfered, said message would have been lost. Kimball is an arrogant jackass and ignores that part, simply wanting to know what the message was. Superman rightfully does not trust her with the Kryptonian connection, simply saying that it's a distress buoy and that the remnants of a city need their help. Kimball, ever the humanitarian, points out that they have ships that can provide help to them, as long as they're willing to exchange their technology for it. Superman, however, says that no one is going but him, and she's gonna need to recognize that if they're gonna work something out. It takes 2 days for the arrangements and deal to be made. In exchange for transport to the city, she gets first look at all the technology he brings back. I agree, praying I won't bring back anything LexCorp can turn into weaponry. Superman successfully brings back a Kryptonian bidet. On the space station where they're launching the ship, Lois will be there to report anything that happens to the world, and Kimball, in a minor moment of real humanity for her character, admits to Superman that she's envious of him because she's always dreamed of traveling through space to another planet. Both she and Lois beg him to come along, but he insists he has to do it alone. LexCorp and Superman have never been the best of friends, but still, I wish you success. Well, thank you, Doctor. Okay, I guess I can bring you back one laser gun. After Superman leaves, Lois asks Kimball why she's so driven. She explains that LexCorp has always been on the cutting edge of technology, and you only stay on top of the company by continuing to push that edge further. I need this, Lane. I won't stop at anything to get it. Great, Superman is running all over the cosmos trying to save lives, while your primary interest is corporate profit. Yes, Lois, are you new to this country? Or this company? And this waking nightmare we live in? On the way to the city, Superman takes time to reflect on how, even if there are other Kryptonians out there, he sees himself as a human and native of Earth first, thanks to the Kents finding him and raising him. However, he also thinks back to the other time he met Kryptonians, ones from a pocket universe that laid waste to their version of Earth. This is another bit of heavy continuity that they certainly did not need to bring up, but there is a point with it. You see, this is one of those examples where Superman has killed. There was no one left on their Earth to pass judgment on these three monsters, so Superman exposed them to their version of kryptonite. I've said it before, particularly in relation to the Man of Steel review, but I hate this plot point, and I'm glad that it seems to have been retconned away after like 3 or 4 other retcons now in the DCU, though who knows anymore. The difference, of course, between this and Man of Steel is illustrated by Superman's words, though. Killing those people was the worst thing I ever did. I was in agony, tortured to the soul. Though the people I killed only existed at the whims of a being known as the Time Trapper, I had betrayed the core of my being. I'm no killer. It's a measure of desperate that I will never resort to again, no matter how deadly the threat. They used it at least for character development and a firm declaration of, I will never do this again. Man of Steel had him scream once and then never mention it again, get over it, and he may have killed more people in Batman v Superman. We don't know because they don't say, but you might want to ask that warlord he tackled. If we can. But yeah, like I've said, weird that this non-canon crossover is so full of continuity drops. Anyway, he arrives at the city and lands on the outskirts of the dome. There's a small bit of atmosphere, probably artificially generated, and Supes flies out to get closer. He admits that he can already start to feel his body's a bit weaker since they're not near any sun. The lack of sunlight will continue to depower him as he goes. And that's consequently a good call by the creators of this, because let's face it, Batman facing xenomorphs is tense because, despite his abilities, he's still a normal human. Superman versus xenomorphs normally should be him blasting them with heat vision from a distance and maybe using a facehugger as a flail against them. The city seems dead, no sounds or power generation coming from it. He soon finds a hatch with scratches and claw marks on it, X-ray vision revealing a bunch of rubble piled up on the other side as a crude barrier. He soon finds a vehicle. A bus? Looks like it tried to crash its way out, and ended up doing a high dive off Dead Man's Curve. Geez, you tell the driver he's running 2 stops behind schedule and he takes it personally. So what were they running from? Blood. They were running from blood! Of course! I'm not the first one who's been here. Someone's already licked up most of it before I could. He hears a moaning noise from inside the bus and realizes there are still survivors inside. He quickly finds 4 unconscious people who need help. Realizing their only chance for survival is Earth, he loads them up on the ship and programs the autopilot to return it to them. He informs Dr. Kimball of this. This is not a MASH unit. I want the technology, Superman, not the patients. Putting aside that kind of a dickish attitude, you realize that these people might know how to build more of their technology, right? He tells them to send the ship back after offloading the patients, but Lois points out he'll be stranded. Admittedly, it might have been smarter for him to go back with the ship to ensure its safe arrival, plus recharge his cells, but I figure his logic is that he needs to stick around and figure out what happened here, especially if there are more people who need help. He can at least let any other survivors know that rescue is coming. Deciding to explore more of the city, he finds some dead facehuggers. Interesting. Some kind of crab. Bet this would go great with butter. Even though this entire rock has a delicate atmosphere, the city itself probably has a more delicate one. I don't want to upset it by crashing my way in. The indirect approach seems more practical. I'll tunnel my way right under the barrier and into the middle of the city. This place is very delicate. I'd better smash my way through a part of it. As he goes down, though, he discovers a cavern full of xenomorph eggs. Some kind of strange rock formations, systematic in organization, yet organic in appearance. Yeah! Because they're organic eggs! Nothing like that in the Krypton I've learned about. I mean, maybe in the Red Light District. More and more, this place seems to reek of death. Really, Superman? What was the first hint of that? The dead bodies, perhaps? We see a xenomorph stalking him as he comes across some of their blood. He's still strong enough that while the acid burns his skin a bit, it doesn't do any worse than that. The xenomorph leaps out at him in a 2-page spread. He manages to toss it away. No matter though, looks fairly harmless. Okay, between this and the rocks thing, I'm starting to think his eyesight is starting to go along with his powers. I mean, even ignoring the serrated tail, the thing has clawed hands and fangs. Not dangerous to Superman under normal circumstances, perhaps, but nothing about it screams fairly harmless. In any case, a more reasonable moment happens here. Regardless of it looking dangerous, it might still be intelligent and reasonable, so Superman tries to communicate with it. I know you've never seen me before, but I'm no threat. I'm here looking for other beings who look like me. Well, cool, Superman, but according to the artwork in this panel, that means you're looking for unfrozen caveman lawyer. Superman acknowledges that the xenomorph may not be intelligent enough to understand speech, but more importantly, the creature is able to cut him with its claws. He admits he hates just punching out something that's probably just protecting its territory, but given the circumstances, he lays it out. For 2 seconds before it attacks him again. You should have quit while you had the chance. I can keep your jaws propped open until... My God! Your dental work is amazing! The extra jaw bites his forehead, forcing Clark to try to wound the alien enough to slow it down, revealing the acid blood, which drips into his eyes. As the fight progresses, Supes is getting weaker and it's getting harder on him. Fortunately, however, he's soon saved by a Kryptonian woman who shoots the xenomorph, then lights it up with a flamethrower. Slinky Ugly, well done! Get it while it's hot!
The duck's burned! You're cooking in a burnt pan, you fucking dick!
She leads him away, warning him that there are a hell of a lot more of them. She's amazed by how he's seemingly immune from the acid blood, and he explains about the sunlight granting him power. She realizes he's not from the city. He must have come here in a ship. Yeah. A nice little detail is that Clark's Kryptonian has an accent to her, a result of him not regularly speaking the language. He explains he's from Earth and that he got their distress buoy. You mean one of those things finally worked? Those were launched years ago. I don't suppose you kept it, did you? One of those goes for hundreds on space eBay. She explains that this is Argo City and that things have not been going great for them. Even aside from the xenomorphs, they ran out of supplies a while ago. She finally gives her name as Kara. And yep, this is supposed to be Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl. It's our last major bit of continuity connection to the regular books, namely that at the time, the policy was that Superman was the only survivor of Krypton. It's why the trio he killed were Kryptonians from a pocket universe. The lack of Supergirl irked many writers over the years, so there were attempts to fill the hole, and it seems this was one way of doing so. Sure, it's a non-canon story, but hey, it was a cute way to modernize the backstory at the time and have Kara be present in some kind of then-modern context. And so our first part of this story ends with the revelation that the people Superman sent back on the ship aren't survivors any longer because chestbursters soon live up to their name inside the craft. This comic is overall okay, but the Batman one had a stronger start. The big advantage it has over the Batman crossover is that it has 3 parts instead of just 2, so this first issue is focusing mostly on setup of the situation, of some of the principal characters, and what will be the big conflict. Superman needing to take on xenomorphs with dwindling powers, and the threat of xenomorphs approaching Earth by accident. But where it fails is that it's not as tense and scary as the Batman one. There's mystery certainly, and if this was an animated work, it'd probably be very easy to get sucked into a creepy atmosphere, but as it stands, I don't feel it quite does enough to illustrate the scariness of the situation, the vast emptiness and dead feeling of it. As it stands, it's fine. Not terrible at all, despite a few things I've snarked on, but it doesn't quite have the same mood. That might also just be because of the nature of a Superman story versus a Batman one. Supes was pulling his punches against the xenomorph because he didn't want to kill a potentially intelligent alien life form, very well illustrated by bringing up the execution of the Pocket Universe Kryptonians, but because Superman is brightly colored and can take more punishment than Batman, there's just a bit less tension in the fight. Still, we're off to a decent beginning to the story, and we will return to it in the future. Next time, we were supposed to take a break for late night double feature, but that's gonna have to simmer in the background because of, well, more schedule slippages. Instead, let's go for an unusual but not unwelcome Patreon-sponsored review with the first Ace Attorney game.
I'm sitting on my couch reviewing comics, the worst words that you will ever see. It's sad that comic books are for geeks, but they're not. They're for everybody. Linkara. If you doubt that I am a man, I am a man.
This place was called Argo City. Argo? Yeah, that movie came out and everybody went wild for it. I prefer the original name, Beastmaster 2 Through the Portal of Time City.
Hello, my friends. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe, hit the bell, and share it with others. And if you get a chance, maybe check out my Patreon.